Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. If you have been wanting to start your own podcast, be sure to check the show notes because it's got a link for you to use Buzzsprout, which I use and highly recommend. It will have your podcast featured on all major players, and it's definitely worth the time. Plus, you'll be able to support this show. Now, let's get into today's episode. My guest today is Tumisang Ntereke, or otherwise known as Tumi. Tumi is originally from Botswana and now studying in the United Kingdom. In this episode, we learned that she fell in love with the field of genetics during a biology class in high school. As most African students who are gifted in maths and science, she pursued medicine, and fortunately, she didn't get into that field. I say fortunately because instead, she got into the field of medical genetics, which she has stayed with until postgrad level. She was awarded a scholarship in Botswana that paid for her A-levels, which also allowed her to further her studies abroad. Currently, Tumi is a PhD student in cancer genetics, specializing in breast cancer detection at the University of Leicester. The focus is on developing biomarkers of breast cancer from exosomes. She tells us more about this very exciting research and its importance. Tumi also tells us how she's adjusting to the new normal as some institutions have opened for scientists to go back to lab-based work. Furthermore, we found out that Tumi has a YouTube channel called Tumie, where she vlogs on her lifestyle as well as the science aspect, and she addresses the stereotype that scientists are, quote, boring. Lastly, we talk about how she deals with imposter syndrome in a space where there's very little representation of people who look like her. Now, to find out about all of this and so much more, tune in. Hi, Tumi. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Anne. You all right?
I'm so excited to have you here and for everybody to get to know more about you and everything that you do.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's such a great initiative.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, for us, let's just get right into it. Can you please just tell us a bit about yourself? So, where you're from, where you're based, and what are you currently doing?
My name is Tumi. I am from Botswana. I currently live in Leicester in the United Kingdom, and I am a PhD student.
Before we get into everything about what you do, I just like to get to know people away from the science. So, like, random question: are you a dog person or a cat person, and why?
I feel like every African I know would definitely be a dog person over a cat.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's literally based off what are those things called? Like
superstition.
Literally just based off superstition. Like, I'm definitely a dog person. I've had a couple of dogs in my lifetime. I'm terrified of cats, especially black cats. If I see it, I literally walk the other direction. I just run away. I don't ever want to see it. But yeah, I think that's literally just the African in me.
Yeah.
Choosing that one even before anything else.
Like they've really just messed with our head. Like, I don't also do cats. Like, I don't like cats. Like, they're cute from afar. Like, but it's okay. Or like just as
it's
kittens.
Not like they've ever done anything to people. Like, you're just scared of it. It's not like they've done anything to me. It's just like scary because of what you heard or what it's associated with in your culture.
My little sister is a cat person, which is
really
different. Yeah, she loves cats. Very
so
into it. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe it's a newer generation because for me, it's like, nah.
I feel like the younger generation's obviously just gonna be doing them. Like, they're not gonna be thinking too much on like what things mean or superstitions, basically.
We've grown up differently. And speaking of growing up, I just want this to then lead us into, what were some of your influences that actually led you into science as a whole when you were growing up?
Yeah.
Did you always know, like, this is something that I want to do, or yeah?
Yeah. So I don't think I really had like an influence that led me into science. I feel like it's one of those things that just kind of happened, because growing up, I was always like, not to brag, but I was always like one of those
brag away.
I always did really well in all like my subjects, and I just happened to pick sciences at high school. And then obviously I did well in those, and then I feel like everyone around me just started pushing the medicine narrative onto me. And then it was you're either going to be a doctor, you're either going to be an engineer. And I feel like that's obviously still with the African narrative that I feel like a lot of people go through. And that was that really. I didn't really give much thought into it. Went through high school, and then I started obviously later high school, we started like the science breaks up into like your biology, your chemistry, and your physics in Botswana. And then during a biology class, like one of my teachers then taught us about genetics. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, that's really cool how like the smallest things make so much of a difference between people. And I just thought that was really interesting. I was watching like your Grey's Anatomy, your Private Practice, like the shows like everybody watches basically. And I thought it was really interesting how they kind of did research and were medical doctors at the side. And I was like, you know what? This is what I want to do. So I thought to be a researcher, you had to be a medical doctor first. So I was so sure that that's the path I wanted to follow. And then I did my A-levels, and then I didn't get into med school. But I did get into like my undergrad course, which I actually did, a medical genetics course. And that's basically, that kind of just happened. And because I then just stayed in medical genetics, and even till today, my project is based in the medical genetics umbrella. So I think I don't really have like a story. I feel like it's just like events that happened that led me here, and it just happened, and I just happened to like what I do. Like I was fortunate enough to not have regretted anything in my past that led me here.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Yeah. That's great that you, even though I was actually speaking to a friend who said that, most of us are accidental scientists where we all we know is medicine or become a doctor or an engineer. And then later on, we accidentally stumble into, like how you said, like medical genetics.
I feel like I kind of blame our schooling system in the sense of like there's no career guidance in that regard. Like they associate science with just your medicine and your engineering. Because I remember even when I went back to school and people would be asking me, oh, what are you doing? And I'd be like, medical genetics. And people are like, oh, why? Like, do you just want to be a lab technician? Like, do you not want to do anything else? And I was like, this narrative is really bad because it makes it sound as if being a scientist is a failure, because I feel like there's not that many career options maybe that they know of. So they just imply that, oh, you're not going to be as amazing as a doctor. Like you should have been a doctor. So I feel like this is really bad. I just feel like career guidance should be a thing.
And
younger.
I can't wait until the next generation, like for example, when I was speaking about my little sister, who gets to have such a broader sense of what science is all about. Like where it's not just two options of what do you want to be in career. You can be a medical geneticist. Like what is that? So I think like it's so important, the awareness aspect of it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so amazing because there's so many people going into science communication now. So I feel like they kind of educate, even with your podcast, you're kind of educating people in the sense of like what science actually is, what a scientist actually looks like, and what you can actually do in science.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
what science means. Yeah,
definitely. Because being a lab tech, like what is wrong with that as well? Like
people treat
what is wrong with that?
As if it's something bad, and I'm just like, no, it's actually not. Like you're literally involved in the research, like literally
hands on in the research. Okay, so you said that this was you fell in love with genetics in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you end up from being in Botswana to being in the UK? Can you just take us on that little journey?
Okay, so remember when I was like, oh, I used to be a really smart kid.
Yes.
So I guess that kind of paid off in the sense of like in Botswana, there's this thing called a top achievers scholarship. So after my GCSEs, I'm not sure what those are called in South Africa, like Form 5. I guess it will be matric in South Africa. After my Form 5,
it's matric.
I did really well, and then I was offered the scholarship. So this scholarship, basically, they paid for my A-levels in Botswana because, they paid for my A-levels in Botswana, and then I did my A-levels, wrote my exams, and then applied for university abroad. And then, I've basically been on that scholarship since.
Wow. So congrats on that. That's fantastic. I mean, why are you not bragging? I would brag away. Like, hey, I was smart.
I don't know. I just feel like I always feel weird even talking about it. Like, I feel like only probably my close friends or my family would even know about stuff like that. It's just weird. I feel like it kind of feels braggy, and I just don't like that.
No, I think you should own it. Like, I get it, but I'm also learning that, if you're good at something, it's what you're good at. Yeah. And if you get rewarded for that, you shouldn't feel bad that you are reaping the rewards, because it's not coming to you from the sky, or like you are doing the work, and then the universe, God, whichever higher power you believe in, will reward you for that hard work. So I say own it. Yes, I was damn good at school, and I got a scholarship, and I'm in the UK, and I'm living my best life. So
I think I feel like it's just a thing of like, I don't know, it's just weird because obviously I have that privilege that when I graduated, I didn't have any debt like hanging over me, or my parents didn't have any more debt hanging over them.
Which it's a luxury. Not many students.
It's a luxury. Yeah, I feel like that's why I'm not really comfortable saying stuff like that. I feel like because I'm aware of what other people have to go, like the lengths that people have to go to even go to university.
It's not easy. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege. But like I said, it's one that you've earned. It didn't just come from the sky. So I think obviously humility is important, but I think you're allowed to feel proud of yourself for the work that you have done. And I will keep gassing you up for that. So by the time we're done here, you'll be like, I earned that scholarship. I earned that scholarship. Okay, so now currently, with all that hard work that you have done and the work that you've earned, you are actually conducting some breast cancer research, because now you're doing your PhD, which is so interesting. The focus on it is developing biomarkers for breast cancer from exosomes. Please tell us a bit about this for people who have no idea what I said other than breast cancer.
So breast cancer right now is diagnosed obviously through tissue biopsies, whereby a sample of your tissue is taken and then it goes to a pathologist, and then they identify cancerous cells within that. And then you're basically diagnosed with cancer, and you're told which stage it's at and treatment options and stuff like that. But there's so many limitations of that, in the sense of like, you can't keep getting repeat samples. Tumors in like breast tumors, tumors in general are kind of like heterogeneous, in the sense of like, it's not the same types of cells everywhere. Like there's different cell types, they mutate, they spread. When they metastasize, like different clones like dominate in different areas. So then the treatment plan that was made using that initial sample might not be an effective treatment plan for all the different types of cancerous cells in your body at any given time. So the tissue biopsies kind of like, it gives you a limited scope of disease. So it would be better to like have a much more genetics-based approach to it, in the sense of like, it can pick up disease from the different cell types. of the cancer from the different areas as well, which is called the liquid biopsy, which is basically, we focus on the blood-based one. So there's different types of analytes within that liquid biopsy. There's your circulating tumor cells, there is your circulating tumor DNA, and then I focus on exosomes, which are tiny little particles that contain DNA, RNA, and protein. So within exosomal cargo, I should be able to differentiate between cancer and normal, and then basically get a bit more information into the disease, what treatment would work better, and then obviously because it's a blood test, when the patient goes back in for like a checkup, they could get the blood drawn, and then that could essentially like be a follow-up to see if the cancer is coming back or if cancer is left for good. Like it will just make life a bit easier in the sense of like cancer would be easily detectable and better understood than it currently is.
Definitely.
I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. So now, is this testing? Is it something that is soon to be implemented, or is it already being implemented, where people are actually conducting these type of research, or are you guys still at the beginning?
I wouldn't say so. As I said, there's different types of analytes that fall under the liquid biopsy umbrella. Exosomes is, I'd say, it's probably the most recent one. The other types, like your circulating tumor DNA, that one's been undergoing research for like probably like a good end of like 20 years or so. So that one it's kind of closer to clinic, like being administered in clinic. But I wouldn't say anytime soon. Like there's so much research going into it, and there's so many great promising results. It's able to detect relapse like months earlier than like the clinical tools being used. But obviously, because you have to be sure that it's specific, you have to be sure that it's sensitive enough to pick up disease. You have to be sure that it's kind of like way better than what's currently being used in clinic. So I feel like until I can't really put a time frame on it, but I feel like soon, especially now that like we're kind of going into the personalized medicine era, whereby I feel like a lot of medicine is kind of going towards the genetics-based approaches, because people are starting to realize and understand that diseases are different because of how people are built. And I feel like as we approach that era, then obviously this would more likely be driven into clinic. But you can't really be like, oh, maybe in like 5 years or maybe in 2 years, because you never really know what's going to actually happen. Because the scientists would understand the relevance of it, but you never really know if the clinicians and the general public would be like, oh, this is worth it.
Yeah, definitely. The public perception is also very important.
I was saying it would be great to have something like that, like something like a blood test essentially for cancer, just like you have one for diabetes. Like that would be awesome.
So efficient as well. So efficient. It's quite interesting how you mentioned that for the first one, that's been the testing has been, or the research has been going on for 20 years, and it's not, and it hasn't even reached like clinical stages. So from somebody who doesn't understand this, you'd probably think,
it might even be more than 20. Like I'm just literally like I've literally just, because I'm thinking of like the oldest paper I've read or referenced. It was early 2000s, so that's I'm just like maybe like 20 or plus years even.
So they're really trying to perfect it before it goes out there. Which is important. Do you think this is just an off the bat question, but do you think, let's say hypothetically, this works in detecting these types of cancers, right? Like your breast cancer. Do you think then this could be translated to other types of cancer?
You see, that's the thing. Like even right now, there are research groups because it's a blood-based diagnostic or blood-based detection of cancer, right? When you draw this blood, you don't really know where the cancer cells are from. So it's essentially, research also goes into like machine learning and stuff that is able to kind of like pinpoint where exactly the cancerous cells originate from and where exactly the metastases are.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not just a breast cancer tool. It's like a tool that can be used across cancers because it kind of falls into the scope of all the cancers. I just
Wow.
have
That's
to focus on breast cancer.
breast
There's
cancer.
other people that focus on like colorectal. There's people that focus on lungs. There's people that
Wow.
focus on different types of cancers, especially with machine learning. It's not even like cancer specific. Like they just kind of try to develop programs that would be able to tell or diagnose, okay, this is where these cells are coming from because of these signatures. This is why we think they came from your breast.
So interesting. Like, this is fascinating what machines will be able to do in the future. Like, mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. So speaking about this research and being in the lab, because this is lab-intensive research, most institutions are opening up. Like, they're opening up to allow researchers like yourself to return or to like transition back into being in the lab. And I know you also recently started going back.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, how has that been? Like post pandemic, not saying that it's over, but like rather during this during this time. Yeah, how is this new normal for you? How are you dealing with it?
Do you know what? To be quite honest, it's really weird.
Yeah.
It's really weird in the sense of like this new normal has kind of forced isolation. Because even though we're all going back into the lab, obviously now less people can go back into the lab and you still need to social distance. You still need to wear your mask. And you kind of, even though there's people around you, you kind of can't interact as you usually would. You can't just banter around. There's just a level of seriousness that's kind of been invoked to prevent, obviously, like the spread. And it's just really weird. Like, I would honestly say that. And it kind of makes you miss what we took for granted, like the old normal.
Yeah, definitely.
And it kind of makes you appreciate, even though people are like, oh, scientists are like, it's a lonely field. You just sit there with your research. It's quite social as well. Like you kind of, like right now, all I do is literally go in, do my research at my bench, and then go home. Whereas I used to like socialize with people and catch up with people, but now it's just like you catch up over text, you catch up over your phone. So I feel like that social element has been taken out, and it's really just a very weird time. So, yeah,
and it's difficult. Difficult because I mean already, especially postgraduate science life, it's a rather lonely sort of field because everybody's got their own individual research. So that ability to talk things over with your colleague, or like be like when you're stuck, sometimes just talking it out with somebody who understands that process.
Which is what I was like, that social element, like it's been taken out. And I didn't like, at first I didn't even notice it. I noticed it like probably like last week Friday when I was there, I'm like, damn, like now if I have a question I need to email or I need to send a text, I can't just hop into this person's office to be like, oh, 1, 2, 3. And it's really weird. It's kind of sad, but yeah, it is what it is, to be honest. Can't really like sit around and hope about it. Like it's really sad.
We can't.
Yeah.
We just have to adapt with it and go with the flow and learn how to process it, So
the best. Like hope that like I guess the end comes quicker than later. Sooner than later.
I wonder when that will be. I truly do
like,
wonder.
This is me being as optimistic as possible.
Oh man.
And she'll come.
Soon, hopefully, So, Tumi, apart from you being this breast cancer researcher, you have a YouTube channel called Tumie which is pretty awesome. I stalked you on there, so check it out.
I absolutely loved it. So I'm just going to give you the opportunity to explain to us what that channel is all about and how you came to actually start it.
So my channel is I want to say it's a lifestyle and a science channel, because I feel like I wanted to kind of address the narrative that scientists are boring, scientists are just smarty pants that don't know how to have fun, or they don't just lead normal lives. And I just wanted to challenge that narrative and just show that there is duality. You can be a scientist and you can still enjoy the other things that other people enjoy. You can be a scientist and you can still be a creative. You can basically just do whatever you want. Science doesn't like engulf you whole. It doesn't take over your life unless you make it or let it. But yeah, I just wanted to show that there's like, you can do whatever. Like, being a scientist shouldn't be, oh, I'm just a scientist. You can do other things alongside being a scientist. And I started it in April. That's when my first video went up. It was quite random. I just had I didn't really think it through. I just kind of had an idea like, oh, maybe I should start a channel, because I've never seen anyone that fits what I think a scientist is on YouTube. Yeah. Of like, I've never come across a YouTuber that is a scientist, like a practicing scientist, and also like just does lifestyle stuff as well, like just does your skincare routine or anything else, like anything lifestyle-y, anything that shows people what you do outside the lab. I've never come across a channel like that. And I was like, you know what, like maybe I can try doing that. I didn't even know if like there'd be a market for it. But yeah, I just kind of like shot my shot, and that's where we are now.
I love it. I love that you shot your shot, and you also, like me, started it during this pandemic time. And look at you.
Literally.
Yeah, I like you mentioned that the whole purpose is you wanted to challenge the narrative, and I was telling you off air that I loved it because it just showed you like quirky and like fun. And like there was a part where you were learning how to dance, and then there's
oh my gosh,
things.
you literally just gone through everything, haven't you?
I went through everything. Like then you went through and you told us about your science, you know, and then there was some okay, I'm not gonna give it away, but then there was so many things that you showed us, like your everyday life with your friends. Like I loved it because it's just so real. You're so much more than this who sits in the lab and the smarty pants. Got it something that's really cool. That's somebody like a girl who's like, hey, I'm smart, but I also like to do my face routine, or I like to hang out with my friends on weekends. And there are so many girls out there who are like, I still want to live my life. I'm still young. I'm still in my 20s, you know. So I think it creates visible role models. Like, hey, Tumi's doing it. Surely it's possible. And
I think that was my big thing, like visibility. I think that was my main thing, like just showing that there's people doing this. You can do it.
Please go check out her YouTube channel. Please go check it out. It's cool. Like I was laughing when I was watching it. So if anything, continue. I don't know how you're going to brand it. Obviously, that's going to be on you. But so far, the formula is working. It's like it's so authentic. I think that should be the main thing. Like just keep it as authentic as possible. It's so relatable. So yeah, I love it. Speaking about being the smart person that you were, that we mentioned earlier on. You mentioned that you got that scholarship that brought you to the UK. Hey, but you also had to deal with, bouts of imposter syndrome where you felt like you don't really belong here. And especially for you, because in most cases in your university career, you're the only Black person in your lab. So that's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot to deal with and to process. So how did you manage? How did you manage?
Do you know what? Like, I feel like it only hit me because so in undergrad, I was doing medical genetics and I was the only Black person on that course. But during my first year, we were doing like people from different degree streams basically had the same courses. So obviously there were other Black people, and that wasn't too bad. But when you get like into second year, into third year, that's when like you start like specializing because of your degree course and degree stream. And that's when I started feeling a bit weird, because I'd often be the only one in the genetics courses. And it would just be a bit weird because there's also no lecturers that look like you. There's no tutorial demonstrators that look like you. Now you start thinking like, do I even belong here? You start thinking, is this like an area that I'm not supposed to be in? And then you start kind of just having these thoughts of, oh, like, do I even belong? Because then university is hard. Like, I feel like university is humbling in the sense of like, I went from being the 90s, 100s girl to being just, the average person grade wise. And I feel like also with that, it kind of made me feel like, oh, maybe you shouldn't have gone into genetics. Like, first of all, like your grades aren't as great as they used to be. And you're also the only person here. Now you start wondering, oh, am I not doing well because of my skin color? Like, is there racism there? You start like overthinking stuff. And I feel like what helped me kind of get over it, I feel like I just started developing a more positive outlook onto it. I started looking at it in the sense of like, you might be the only one there, but that might be the start of something. Like, you might be the beginning of something. You might be the one that's opening the doors for other people to come into it, which is also what kind of drove me into deciding to do my PhD almost immediately after my undergrad, because I was like, you might as well just continue on this now instead of stopping and then maybe feeling like, do you know what, like, let me not go back there. That wasn't a great place. I don't belong there. Just keep going and then see where you're going to end up. You might end up in a great space. You might, like, you being visible there is what kids need. Like, the undergrads, they'll see the Black PhD student and they'll be like, oh, I could do that as well. So it's just a thing of like, I just had to kind of like believe in myself more, believe that things happened because I deserved them. Because a part of me, even with my PhD, there's a point where I started wondering if I got it. Like, I got the offer because I was Black and they were kind of ticking boxes. I don't know if that's like a thing that you've ever like heard
like a
of.
token, sort of, like you being tokenized.
Yeah. A part of me thought that.
Yeah. No, I get that.
So it's just a thing. You just need to kind of like just think positive, just affirm yourself, let yourself know that you deserve to be there. You've worked hard to get there, and you're as deserving as any other person, regardless of their color. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think that's what helped me.
Yeah, I love how you said that you did this because you thought that you could be the start of something. Being a trailblazer is hard. Like, it is hard, and it sucks to be the first because it's like being the firstborn. Like, you have to go through the your parents learning how to look after a kid, and similarly for you, like, you have to be the first in this field, and there's going to be a lot of mishaps, or these feelings are going to be strong. But who knows, maybe 2 years time there'll be 5 Black people in genetics. You can be like, yeah, I did that, and you can tell them how to survive these things that were hindrances for you. And I think you are in that perfect place. So you are definitely meant to be where you are. And imposter syndrome is she is not the girl. She's not the girl who she thinks she is.
It'll make you feel so like, why am I here? What am I doing? And you start overthinking things as well. Like, it's so, nah.
I think, remember we had that conversation off air as well, where I was telling you that when I got accepted into my PhD, I was excited. And then, that imposter syndrome comes in and is like, are you actually here? Like, do you deserve it? And that thing just makes you like, no, okay, maybe not. So I completely
get that. It kind of humbles you in a way. Like, you kind of start thinking, oh, why am I here? Like you kind of start comparing even the small things like, oh, this person has like this many papers. I don't have this many papers. You start comparing the small things and you forget that like everybody's journey is different.
Different, yeah. Definitely.
And it's just, imposter syndrome isn't fun. And I feel like it's one of those things that like, I feel like everybody kind of goes through, but it's kind of heightened when, one, you're in a foreign country, far from your family, and two, you're probably like on your own in the sense of like you have to go through the motions alone. You have to pick yourself out of these situations, and it gets really, it's a thin line between losing yourself, trying to fit in, and retaining yourself so that you're just always authentic and you're truly who you are, and you're not just trying to do things to fit in, or you're not just trying to do things just so the imposter syndrome goes away.
Yeah, it's a very, very blurry line that you will constantly have to keep on fighting it. Like it just never goes away. Like you'll have a good couple of weeks and then boom. So I think we have to accept. And I think that another important thing is having these conversations that, hey, that feeling that you're feeling is normal and it happens. Just to close it off to me, your final piece of advice to anyone who's how to get into STEM as a whole, or just specifically in your field, a field that not many people know actually exists. What would you say to them?
Do you think you're interested in genetics or medical genetics especially, I'd say just do it. Go for it. Don't really get lost with what people say about it, in the sense of like a lot of people will question, oh, where are you going to get a job? Where are you going to work? Where are you going to do this? Where are you going to do that? I'd say just follow your heart and push through. And I'm a firm believer in that things happen for a reason and you attract good things by working hard. So I just feel like put your heart into it, put all your effort into it, and everything will work out for you. And don't be discouraged by not seeing a lot of people that look like you, or not having mentors in your field that can guide you on that journey.
You know, it's important that you realize you belong. Everything happens for a reason. And just because you're the only one does not mean that it's not meant to be. Yeah, it's not meant to be, which is important. And
I feel like there's power in having mentors in different spaces. And I feel like, especially with my field, I've always wanted a mentor, but I don't have a mentor. People like me who go into these areas or careers where not a lot of people are willing to even like be the mentor or whatever, just you have to push through and literally just work hard, because you're not going to have anyone to cry to and just be like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to go about this.
Yeah.
So you just need to become that soldier. You just need to power through, push through, even during the darkest times.
Definitely. Definitely. Tumi, it was lovely talking to you. I enjoyed our conversation so much. It was so much fun and so interesting to chat with you. And to everybody else who's listening, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Root of the Sounds podcast with your girl and with an E. Until next time, goodbye.